Okay, so a very, very good afternoon to everyone. And thank you so much, Rima, for those kind words. And it's such a joy to see you and Vaidehi chairing this session. I'm quite elated to see my colleagues virtually, though I'm really wanting to be with all of you physically. Uh, Let me at the outset thank Dr. Banshi Sabu, Ms. Dr. Sanjay Agarwal, Dr. Vasant Kumar for hosting such a wonderful conference, RSS DI 2021. And I think it is a matter of pride today as a national president of Indian Dietetic Association for me to place on record our gratitude that we have collaborated with RSSDI in a big way. And we are, launching our diabetes specific nutrition education modules, both basic and advanced modules, soon after we finish with RSSDI. In fact, there will be an introduction to them during the conference. And I'm extremely elated that the faculty who is here in this nutrition symposium, they are integral part of, making and standardizing these modules in joint working with others from the association and experts across India. So the topic on which I'm going to talk is the relevance of carbohydrate counting in Indian context. And I dedicate my talk today to to the theme of the National Diabetes Day, that is, healthcare access to diabetics. So, to my mind, I think, I'm going to take the concept of carbohydrate counting beyond diabetes. And that's the perspective I would like to showcase to the medical and nutrition fraternity, and try to give you some important messages that, where is it that we as nutritionists really need to be contributing. I mean, I was amazed to hear Mr. Arnab Goswami in the inauguration, and his forthcoming approach of reaching out to people. So I think nutritionists have to be there, in this mass campaign of simplifying things and educating people at two levels, which I will be talking, in the next few slides, which I share. That means starting from generic to specific. So just give me uh, a minute to share my slides with you. And you can quickly tell me if you can see my slides. Can you see my slides? And can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the relevance of carbohydrate counting in Indian context, and that's precisely which I set the context and I set the tone that India as a country is a carb country, and we have had many elegant studies, and one of the studies which most of us quote is the START study, which was led by Dr. Shashank Joshi and his group. And what we found in the study was that between the adults who had type 2 diabetes and the ones who did not have type 2 diabetes, the carbohydrate intake was close to 64% of the energy, total energy. And I think in the non type 2 diabetes group, it was higher than this. The second thing, which is very alarming, is the rampant increase in the number of diabetics. the apparent diabetics, the younger type 2 diabetics, and the pre-diabetics. And we have some of our data, which I will cite in the next slide, which makes us very, very concerned and bothered as to what we really need to do, because considering that we are a carbohydrate eating country, I think carbohydrate counting has to be at the center stage. And one keyword which I want you to be left with as a food for thought, and something which needs to be disseminated to each and every Indian, each and every individual of this country, is that whether you are a diabetic or whether you are not a diabetic, whether you are an adult or whether you are an adolescent or you are a young adult, carbohydrate still remains a rationed nutrient for Indians. And that is where carbohydrate counting, with this backdrop, can have immense relevance from generic applications to specific applications. So when I say generic, I think the carbohydrate counting starts from the basic beginning of the story of not even obesity. I would say overweight, or today we have lean obesity. We have people who are having high body fat at low BMI. So I think carbohydrate counting is very, very relevant even there. And we take one step forward, and we relate carbohydrate counting to the entire range of cardiometabolic risk factors. So you name it, whether you call it hyperinsulinemia, you call it hypertriglyceridemia, insulin resistance, a high abnormal lipid profile, high inflammatory markers, everything, gets related to the quantity and quality of carbohydrate which we consume. And of course, for sure, for the diabetics, both type 2, which kind of gets related to the cardiometabolic risk profile, which is very much in sync with the type 2 diabetics, and a very, very precise way of handling the type 1 diabetics. And I think we had some very elegant talk by my colleagues, just in this session, that yes, carbohydrate counting, if done in the most precise manner, with the continuous glucose monitoring, I think we can really succeed in managing diabetics very, very productively. But not to forget that carbohydrate counting is not only for diabetics. I think it is also for people who are just overweight, who are lean obese, and who may be having not a very good body composition, who may be having cardiometabolic risk factors. So definitely, in the recent past, the United States Preventive Task Force has recommended that screening for diabetes at an early age for Asian Americans. Now, we had just a paper published by Dr. Mishra in just I think about 15 days back, where he's spoken about, along with his group, it's a multicentric compiled data, where he's spoken about that, type 2 diabetes is occurring at younger ages. So, we really need to ponder about it. And our recently published paper in the Frontiers, we have also quoted, a prevalence of 29% of pre-diabetes and hyperinsulinemia in 16 to 25 years of adolescents and young adults in Mumbai city. So this boils down to the recommendation which I think Dr. Mishra and their group has made to Government of India to lower down the screening age for pre-diabetes and diabetes. They have addressed more on type 2 diabetes, but I would go one step forward, that they are looking at dropping the age of screening from 30 years to 25 years. But in my concluding slide, you will see that I am of the opinion that it should be brought down even to 20 or 16 years, because we are seeing high level of hyperinsulinemia at this age as well, in older adolescents and young adults. And of course, it is also mentioned in the recommendations that the screening definitely should be targeted to overweight and obese, especially with a family history of diabetes, with a focus on waist circumference, which we know is a very important parameter. Uh, Now, when we talk of carbohydrate counting, like I said, I'm looking at the whole concept in a very, very different way. So, when we are looking at carbohydrate counting, we cannot not talk about the quality of carbohydrate. We cannot not talk about the food ingredient matrix from where you are getting the carbohydrate, because carbohydrates per se are not only responsible for the highs and lows, but I think what goes in the food ingredient matrix has a huge impact on the way carbohydrate impacts our postprandial levels. And just now it was mentioned that it's the glycemic variability which is going to push us to more and more complications. So, what is carbohydrate counting? I mean, for a very, very simple way to explain everybody is that it's basically, a way by which you can bring in, variety and flexibility even in the normal way you are eating. Because I think unless and until we make eating simple, unless and until we tell people that eating right is not a rocket science, within your normal way of eating, you can become carbohydrate literate, and you can get that flexibility, that variety, not going off tangent to what you're used to. Of course, when it comes to precise nutrition, we have to match the amount of carbohydrate, the quality of carbohydrate with the dosage of insulin, because here, our endeavor is to maintain the blood glucose levels in the desirable range as much as possible. So, the prerequisites of carbohydrate counting, I don't need to teach this literate audience that we have to begin with a meal plan. We have to start from what the person needs in terms of calories, and how do we have the macronutrient distribution. Which are the food groups which contain carbohydrates, which are the foods which contain carbohydrate, the amount of carbohydrate in each food item, amount of carbohydrate from each food item at one meal. And of course, how do we explain all this to people at large, and especially the person sitting across your table, is to make things simple. And the simplest way to teach a person is to talk his or her language, and that is the language of portion sizes, and making things as much simple as possible. So this is, just to give you a glimpse of what food groups actually bring carbohydrates to an Indian diet, and what is it that we can do to make carbohydrate counting simple for Indians. So there are very many methods which are documented, and it's like I just wanted to re-emphasize that we may talk of advancement in technology, we may talk of many things which are now coming in the management of diabetes, precision monitoring, precision working. But at the end of the day, let's face it, that majority of Indians still are not that technology savvy. They still cannot afford a lot of things. So the education of carbohydrate counting has to be very, very simple, whether it is the palm, whether it is a fist, whether it's a handful, whether it's the thumb, whether it's the thumb tip. and again showing them the portions, actually, which relate to 15 grams of carbohydrate, which we relate as something equating to 1 unit of insulin, which is more in line with a type 1. But even otherwise, for a non-diabetic, I think we all should know which are the foods which are giving us carbohydrate, how much of a food will actually contribute, to 15 grams of carbohydrate. And there is another aspect which needs to be talked, and to my mind, this aspect is much more important than just counting carbohydrates. So every time you talk about carbohydrates to your patient, bring them back to their plate, bring them back to the important messages which you want to leave them with. Talking about carbohydrate coming with a lot of fiber, so a lot of emphasis on dietary fiber, not forgetting the protein and good quality fat, and again laying down the combinations, actually showing them that how is it that's very simply they can achieve carbohydrate counting with a very well balanced layout of the plate, which brings all the important macro and micronutrients which are equally important for a diabetic. Now, I said that carbohydrate counting is important for the cardiometabolic risk factors, and there is huge amount of data to show that just by rationing carbohydrates, improving the quality of carbohydrates, not only we get good glycemic control, we get better effects on the anthropometric indicators, blood pressure, and all the other cardiometabolic risk factors. And on the other hand, we also have data to show that the moment you go high on the high glycemic index foods, high glycemic index carbs, the risk to stroke and major CV events goes higher, and it's stronger among those with pre-existing CVD. I just want to bring to the table some of the work which we have done in the field of carbohydrates. And like I said, it's not only just important to quantify. Yes, message clear. Carbohydrates are to be rationed. They need to be quantified in your plate. But how do you get quality? And again, for getting quality, you have to look back to your own Indian heritage. And that's where we did some work to analyze our own simple Indian foods, and in the most simple cooked forms in which we consume them. And we found that the pulses top the charts in resistant starch, which is a quality carbohydrate. Between the rice and wheat, it's the rice which do better. Rice, when combined with pulses, do better in resistant starch. When a cereal is dextrinized, it does better in resistant starch. When a pulse is sprouted, it does better in resistant starch. And we didn't stop here. We published this data, and we used this experimental diet on healthy adults, not diabetic, but healthy adults in 25 to 45 years. And we could achieve 16 grams of resistant starch, for the 2000 calorie diet, which was given to these individuals. And not only we looked at their anthropometric and the biochemical parameters relating to sugars and lipid profile, but we also looked at their fecal microflora. And we found that by rationing carbohydrates and by enhancing the quality of carbohydrates, we could achieve a lot in terms of the weight, BMI, body fat, lowering of cholesterol, blood sugars, and better gut flora. We have also done, a randomized control trial on the effect of almond consumption on glucose metabolism, hyperinsulinemia, and selected markers of inflammation. It was a RCT in adolescents and young adults in Mumbai, India. And we just published in Frontiers in Nutrition 2021. And what I want to highlight through this RCT is that it was actually again, controlling the quantum of carbohydrates, controlling the intake of HFSS laden snacks with, two handful of nuts. So wherein in this RCT we used almonds, two handful of almonds. So with only this much of, intervention for a period of 90 days, uh, we could actually bring decrease in the hyperinsulinemia of the pre-diabetic population, because that was the population which was subjected to this intervention in this RCT. And not only decrease in hyperinsulinemia, decrease in HbA1c, decrease in the lipid profile, and decrease in the inflammatory markers. So I think it speaks volumes when you support your statement with robust evidence-based data. Of course, no two doubts about it. Type 1 diabetes and carbohydrate counting goes hand in hand. And my dear colleague Cheryl, I think she has helped so many type 1 diabetics doing wonderful work. And if we support this carbohydrate counting, with CGMS, which is the order of the day, even if it takes intensive insulin therapy, I think that's what is the recommendation today, because what we want is a good metabolic control, less hypoglycemia, and a reduction in HbA1c. Of course, I don't need to go into the details of these calculations about insulin to carbohydrate ratio, insulin sensitivity factors, how do you calculate the insulin dosage based on the total amount of carbohydrate you are consuming. Of course, this is a part of your precision nutrition, but yes, educating the patient is very, very important, not making things complicated. And I think it was brought in very, very well that reading labels is also very important, and something which is sugar free not necessarily is carbohydrate free, or fat free. And let me again remind everybody that, we cannot live in compartments. When we are dealing about carbohydrate counting for a diabetic, we have to look at carbohydrate along with protein, along with fats, and we have to address the quality at all the three macronutrient levels. So again, education here in terms of whatever is written on the label, you have to understand how much of that product are you consuming, and how much is it contributing in terms of the carbohydrate. So there are challenges, and like I said, I dedicate this talk to the healthcare professionals, the nutritionists, who really have to come on board, uh, talk simple, talk applied, reach out to people, and see to it that whatever messages we are wanting them to understand are understood. And at the end of the day, friends, we have to deliver how much ever we may know. But if we do not create success stories with diabetes, and not only, again I say, not only with diabetes, even the half the country is sitting on the edge of cardiometabolic risk factors. So unless and until we make a difference in their life, I think we are really not contributing. So this is just to give you a glimpse that carbohydrate counting can be so detailed that you can actually allocate the carb serving meal wise, you can quantify it, and I showed you the plate. So I feel it's always good to talk the language of food, to talk the language of plate, so that the person gets a complete perspective and not only compartmentalized a perspective. So my take home messages for everyone here is that carbohydrate counting literacy, I'm coining this word, carbohydrate counting literacy is important for Indian population. And mind you, it's a very important statement, because the ramifications of carbohydrate counting literacy range from, non-diabetic Indian population to a diabetic population. So it ranges from generic to specific. The second important message I want to leave you all with, that Indian adolescents and young adults are at a very high risk to prediabetes and poor metabolic health. And this is the future of this country. So carbohydrate counting needs to reach this population. We don't have to wait for them to become pre-diabetics. This carbohydrate counting literacy has to reach them through a healthy plate, because so that they get a complete perspective of not only just looking at carbohydrates and the quality, but also looking at the right balance in the plate. We have evidence-based data in which I shared with you that there is a direct correlation of diet quality with metabolic health. And again, I reiterate, a qualified nutritionist should be an integral part of the healthcare team. So it goes without saying that, if nutritionists form an important part of such an important symposium of RSSDI, if nutritionists come together with the medical fraternity to make modules to reach out to people, and give these messages related to carbohydrate counting and precision nutrition, I think that's what is what we expect out of this conference. And last but not the least, metabolic screening should be done as early as possible. And like I said, I would be more happy if the government of India makes it mandatory for screening every adolescent starting from 16 to 25 years for metabolic health parameters. And an awareness about carbohydrate counting is taken as a mandate, as a national mandate, to make the population literate about this. I think we will do a lot to decrease on the impending prevalence of prediabetes and metabolic disorders, diabetes, and various cardiometabolic events. So thank you very much for a very patient hearing, and I would be most happy to answer any questions. Thank you.